Hey everyone, my name is Kate and welcome to Art Talk channel. This is a space where we explore art in a simple and engaging way. And today's subject is one of my all-time favorite artists, yet also one of the most eccentric figures of the 20th century, Egon Schiele. Even if you haven't heard his name before, you've probably seen his works. Tense, twisted figures frozen in unnatural poses, exuding a strange, almost unsettling energy. Looking at them, you might wonder, why do they seem so eerie? Why do the characters appear so detached, staring right through you? Spoiler alert, life wasn't practically kind to Schiele, and his experiences left a deep mark on his art. But let's start from the beginning. Unlike many famous artists, Schiele didn't come from an artistic family. His father, grandfather, uncle, and older sister all worked at the railway station. In fact, he was born at the railway station on June 12, 1890. He grew up in Tulln, a small town 19 miles west of Vienna. Yet from early childhood, Schiele showed an undeniable artistic talent. He would spend hours drawing, sketching objects around the house or the view outside. His mother recalled later in an interview that at the age of 7 he started drawing trains. And as you can see here, he did a surprisingly complex work for a child. His father, Adolf Schiele, was proud of his own profession and envisioned a similar future for his son. The family belonged to the middle class and led a comfortable life. However, the town they lived in was so small that it didn't even have a secondary school. At the age of 11, Schiele had to move to a nearby town to continue his education. A year later, he transferred to a school in Klosternburg, closer to Vienna. 3 years later, the rest of the family joined him, his parents and 2 sisters. The move was driven by his father's declining physical and mental health. Adolf has been suffering from syphilis for years, and as the disease progressed, he experienced severe mood swings and violent outbursts. He would run through the house, smashing dishes and shouting at family members. The atmosphere at the house was incredibly tense, and he needed medical supervision. A year after Schiele's father passed away, before his death in a fit of despair, he burned all of the family savings, stocks, and bonds. This loss had a profound impact on Egon. He struggled emotionally and had an increasingly distant relationship with his mother. He believed that she wasn't grieving enough, that she didn't truly understand the depth of their loss. She, on the other hand, felt that he was being overly dramatic and should have already moved on with his life. She even wrote about this to her friend. "He is impossible to deal with. He's constantly snapping back at me." Many years later, when Egon was given an interview about his life in Vienna, he shared his perspective on the situation. He said, "My mother never loved me. If she had cared for me even a little, everything would have been different." Family issues didn't stop there. Schiele had a younger sister, Gertrude, or Gerti, and the relationship remained one of the most controversial aspects of his life. Gertrude posed nude for Egon from a very young age, which has led many art historians to speculate about the nature of their bond. They would often lock themselves in a room, refusing to let their parents enter. On one occasion, the father was so disturbed by this behavior that he broke down the door, only to find Egon and Gertie developing a film. Another accident added to the mystery surrounding the relationship. When Egon was 16 and Gertrude was 12, he secretly took her on a trip to Trieste, Italy. They spent 2 days there, staying in a hotel room with a single bed. The choice of destination wasn't random. Trieste was the city where the parents had spent their honeymoon. After his father's death, Schiele's godfather, Leopold Czaszek, became his guardian. Leopold firmly believed that Egon should abandon his artistic ambitions and pursue a more stable career, perhaps as an engineer. But Schiele had no interest in this field. He was completely consumed by art. At school, he was a difficult child. His restless nature made it hard for him to get along with others, but he managed to connect well with the teachers he found interesting. One teacher, Ludwig Strauch, was so impressed by Egon's talent that he convinced his mother to let him apply to Vienna's School of Fine Arts. However, when Schiele presented his portfolio, the instructors deemed him too talented for the institution and suggested he apply directly to the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts. This could have been a sign of genuine encouragement, but it's also possible that the teachers simply didn't want to deal with a student who was already showing signs of being difficult to manage. So in the fall of 1906, Schiele entered the academy. He was 16 years old. Fun fact, if another applicant hadn't failed the entrance exam a month earlier, Schiele would have been in the same class as Adolf Hitler. Moving to Vienna opened up a whole new world for him. He rented an apartment from his godfather and frequently borrowed money from him, never repaying it. Details about this period are scarce, but we do know that Schiele took commissions to make ends meet. He painted landscapes, still lifes, and on one particularly strange occasion, a posthumous portrait of a shopkeeper's deceased son, painting directly over the coffin. It's not uncommon for young artists to feel bored in an academic environment that imposes rigid structures upon them. The same happened to Schiele. He didn't last long following the instructions given by the professors. Soon he started skipping classes, doing only the bare minimum, and dedicating his freed up time to creating paintings that truly interested him and conducting his own experiments. One of the most remarkable works created by the artist during this period was the Harbor of Trieste. It stands out significantly from the works we will see later in his career. The painting is filled with bright, vibrant colors, and to add more dynamism, Schiele used a technique where he scratched the oil paint with the back of his brush. This stage, the main focus shifted toward building a career and meeting the right people. He was trying what we would call now networking and accumulating social capital. He was eager to meet Klimt, his idol at the time, and to show him his works and hear his opinion. At the time, one of the best ways for young artists to make useful connections was to frequent Vienna's cafes. These cafes were scattered throughout the city, each catering to a specific field. If a young person wanted to meet writers and poets, they would go to a literary cafe. If they, like Schiele, wanted to connect with renowned painters, they would visit an art-focused cafe. As you may have guessed, Egon frequently visited such a place, and at some point he achieved his goal. He met Klimt. He told him about his work and even proposed a meeting to showcase his paintings. Klimt agreed enthusiastically and invited Schiele to his studio. He was deeply impressed by the young artist's talent and offered to mentor him. Naturally, Egon eagerly accepted and began working with Klimt. During this period, Schiele's works started to strongly resemble those of his mentor. We can see clear references in the shapes of the figures, the style of the hair, and even the composition of the paintings. Klimt was one of the founders of the Vienna Secession, a creative movement that brought together painters, sculptors, designers, and fashion artists to collaborate on various artistic projects, from designing postcards and book covers to creating full-fledged fashion collections. The young Schiele also joined the organization and even released his own clothing collection. Moreover, he managed to bring his sister Gertrude into the circle. She became a model for the fashion shows. Schiele loved working on fashion collections. He was a true fashion enthusiast. He enjoyed creating unique outfits, adding intricate details, and never missed a chance to check himself out in the mirror. This self-awareness extended to his signature on his paintings. He experimented with numerous variations, struggling to find the one that best expressed his individuality. In 1909, after 3 years of study, Schiele left the academy. He found an apartment for rent in Vienna's 9th district and began living more independently, though still on his uncle's financial support. His new studio was, to put it mildly, quite peculiar. The walls were white, but absolutely everything else was black, from sofas to chairs, from cups to curtains. The only place where color was allowed was the painting on the easel. This aesthetic, almost monastic style was something he adopted from Klimt. In fact, many artists of that time decorated their studios in a similar manner. Overall, Klimt's influence on Schiele during this period was immense. His mentor not only guided him through artistic experimentation, but also introduced him to influential people, such as the art collector Heinrich Benesch. Klimt also helped promote Schiele's work, finding clients for him whenever possible. Between 1910 and 1911, Schiele's individual style started to emerge more vividly. His works took on the characteristics we discussed at the beginning of this video. Depictions of nude bodies in tents, contoured poses, themes of eroticism, death, and the human psyche. This was the period when Schiele's inner conflict and anxieties began manifesting in his art. He seemed to provoke the viewer, seeking understanding and acceptance even when reliving his darkest thoughts and fantasies. During his time at the academy, Schiele often used young boys and girls from the neighborhood as models. He invited them into his home, allowing them to rest from abusive households, have a meal, and sleep. At the same time, the children were happy to pose for him. However, this took a dramatic turn in 1912. As Schiele traveled across Austria, staying in small towns, he continued to use children as his models. Some of them posed in semi-nude or even fully nude states, which drew the attention of the police. Schiele was arrested and spent 24 days in prison for corrupting minors. However, despite the nudity in his paintings, there is no evidence that Schiele ever engaged in any physical misconduct with his models. He was deeply offended by such accusations, as for him, these children represented the existential despair of impoverished youth, the fragility of the human body, and the injustice of life. Schiele's romantic life was as complex as his art. His main muse was Wally Neusel, a former model for Klimt. She traveled with Egon around Austria, posed for him, and inspired many of his iconic works. The relationship was passionate and intense. However, in 1915, Schiele decided to marry Edith Harms, a woman from a respectable family whom he saw as a more socially advantageous match. The news of his marriage was a devastating blow to Wally. Although Schiele proposed they remain friends and that she continue to be his muse, she chose to leave him forever. His marriage to Edith granted him social recognition but lacked the emotional intensity of his relationship with Wally. Some researchers believe that after losing Wally, Schiele's art lost some of its vibrancy and never returned to its former expressiveness. At the time of his marriage, World War I was already across Europe. Almost immediately after the wedding, Egon was drafted into the army. Fortunately, thanks to Klimt's influence, Schiele was assigned to an archival position rather than the front lines. This allowed him to continue painting, albeit under restricted conditions. During this time, he created numerous portraits of soldiers, wartime scenes, and self-portraits that reflected the tension of the era. By 1917, Schiele returned to Vienna and saw his fame rise rapidly. His paintings sold well, and his name became widely recognized. In 1918, after Klimt's death, Schiele effectively became the leading figure of the Vienna secession. His solo exhibition that year featured 50 paintings and over 100 drawings. That was a true triumph. At this point, his work began shifting away from its former darkness. His compositions became more monumental, colors richer, and themes broader. He started exploring new artistic directions, creating expressive group portraits and large-scale scenes. His art was on the verge of a new phase. But fate had other plans, and in 1980, the Spanish flu pandemic swept across Europe, claiming millions of lives. Among the victims was Schiele's wife Edith. Just 3 days after her death, Schiele himself succumbed to the disease. His final sketches, drawn from his deathbed, were dedicated to Edith, who was pregnant at the time. The world lost a genius too soon, but Schiele's legacy endures. The works that were once deemed obscene are now celebrated for their emotional rawness and honesty. His ability to expose the depths of the human psyche, its fears, desires, and uniqueness, make his art even more powerful than it was a century ago. And with that, my story comes to an end. Thank you for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Egon Schiele's art and life in the comments. Also, let me know which artists you'd like me to cover next, and I'd be happy to do so. See you soon. Bye bye.